It was just after midnight in Paris. The streets were quiet. The city lights reflected softly along the river, and a black Mercedes sped through the darkness. Moments later, everything changed. A violent crash inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel shattered the silence. Cameras flashed, sirens began to wail, and within hours, the world would learn that one of the most beloved women of the 20th century had been gravely injured. Her name was Diana. To millions of people across Britain and around the world, she was not simply Diana, Princess of Wales. She was something far more personal. She was the people's princess, a woman who shook hands with AIDS patients when others were afraid to touch them, a mother who tried to raise her sons in the shadow of a palace while still giving them glimpses of ordinary life. But on the morning of August 31st, 1997, the fairy tale that once captivated the world came to a sudden and heartbreaking end. Princess Diana was only 36 years old. Was it simply a tragic accident caused by speed, alcohol, and relentless paparazzi? Or was there something more behind the crash that took the life of Diana, Princess of Wales? To understand that night in Paris, we must first return to where her story truly began. Princess Diana. Long before the world knew her as Diana, Princess of Wales, she was simply a quiet young girl growing up in the English countryside. Diana Frances Spencer was born on July 1st, 1961, in Norfolk, England. She was the youngest daughter of Viscount and Viscountess Althorp, part of one of Britain's oldest aristocratic families. The Spencer family had long been connected to the British royal household. Their estates stood close to royal properties, and for generations their lives moved quietly alongside the monarchy. Yet Diana's childhood was not the perfect picture of privilege many imagined. Her parents' marriage broke down when she was young, leaving emotional scars that stayed with her for years. Friends later described her as shy, sensitive, and deeply compassionate toward others who felt lonely or overlooked. She attended boarding school in Kent and later finished school in Switzerland. Unlike many young women of her social background, Diana did not immediately pursue a life of luxury or high society. Instead, she moved into a modest apartment in London with friends and began working ordinary jobs. One of those jobs would later surprise many people who only saw her as a royal figure. Diana worked as a kindergarten teacher at the Young England School. She loved children and often seemed happiest when surrounded by them. Those early experiences revealed a side of her character that would later define her public image. She had a natural warmth, an ability to connect with people without distance or ceremony. Fate began to shift her life in 1977. That was when Diana first crossed paths with Prince Charles. At the time, Charles was already well known as the heir to the British throne. Ironically, his first connection to the Spencer family had not been Diana, but her older sister, Lady Sarah, who had briefly dated the prince. Diana was only 16 when she first met him. Over the next few years, their paths crossed occasionally at social events and family gatherings. Charles, nearly 13 years older than Diana, was approaching the age when the royal family expected him to marry. As their acquaintance grew, attention from the press slowly began to build. Then, on February 24th, 1981, the announcement came that captured the imagination of the entire world. Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer were engaged. 5 months later, on July 29th, 1981, their wedding took place at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. The ceremony was watched by hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide. Crowds filled the streets from Buckingham Palace to the cathedral, hoping to witness what many believed was a modern fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. Diana was only 20 years old. Within a year of the wedding, the royal couple welcomed their first son, Prince William. 2 years later, Prince Harry was born. To the public, the young princess seemed to bring a new spirit into the royal family. She was graceful, approachable, and remarkably genuine in a world often defined by distance and tradition. But behind the palace walls, the reality of royal life was far more complicated than the fairy tale people believed. In the early years after her marriage, Diana, Princess of Wales, quickly became one of the most recognizable women in the world. Wherever she appeared, crowds gathered. People did not simply admire her, they felt connected to her. There was something about Diana that felt different from the traditional image of royalty. She did not seem distant or untouchable. She seemed human. This connection became the foundation of her global influence. During the 1980s, Diana, Princess of Wales, transformed the public role of the royal family. She visited hospitals, charities, and communities that had long been ignored by the spotlight. At a time when fear and misunderstanding surrounded many illnesses, Diana chose to stand beside those who were suffering. One moment in particular changed how the world saw her. In 1987, Diana publicly shook hands with a patient living with AIDS. At that time, many people still believed the disease could be spread through touch. Even some medical workers hesitated, but Diana sat beside patients, spoke with them, and held their hands without gloves. The image traveled around the world. It was not simply a photograph. It was a message. Diana, Princess of Wales, also raised awareness for many other humanitarian causes. She spoke openly about mental health, supported organizations helping victims of domestic violence, and later became involved in international campaigns against landmines. Her work reached far beyond Britain and into communities across Africa, Asia, and Europe. Because of this compassion, the British public gave her a nickname that would follow her for the rest of her life: the People's Princess. Yet while the public saw a confident and compassionate figure, Diana herself was struggling privately. Life inside Buckingham Palace was far more isolating than she had expected. The sudden shift from a modest apartment in London to the strict traditions of royal life left her feeling alone. There were rules for everything: how she dressed, how she spoke, where she went, even how she appeared in public. The intense attention from the media only increased the pressure. Photographers followed her everywhere. Newspapers analyzed every movement, every expression, every rumor. Over time, the strain began to affect her health. Diana later revealed that she had developed bulimia during the early years of her marriage. The disorder reflected a deeper struggle with self-worth and emotional isolation. Despite living in one of the most famous palaces in the world, she often felt that she had no one to confide in. To the public, the story still looked like a fairy tale. But behind the cameras and the headlines, the marriage between Diana, Princess of Wales, and Prince Charles was beginning to fall apart. And soon, the truth would become impossible to hide. As the 1980s moved forward, the image of the royal fairy tale began to fracture. Behind palace doors, the marriage between Diana, Princess of Wales, and Prince Charles was already deeply troubled. The two had entered marriage as near strangers. By Diana's own recollection, they had met only a handful of times before their engagement. At first, the pressure of royal life strained their relationship. But soon another problem became impossible to ignore: Camilla Parker Bowles. Camilla had known Prince Charles for years before he met Diana. Their relationship dated back to the early 1970s. Though they had not married, their emotional connection never truly disappeared. For Diana, the realization that Camilla still occupied a place in Charles's life was devastating. Shortly before her wedding, Diana reportedly discovered a bracelet Charles had purchased for Camilla, even during their honeymoon. Charles wore cufflinks that had been given to him by her. These discoveries left the young princess feeling betrayed and powerless. In 1989, Diana confronted Camilla directly at a social gathering. According to accounts shared later, the exchange was calm but painfully direct. Camilla told Diana that she already had everything a woman could want. She had a prince, a palace, and 2 sons. Diana's response became one of the most quoted lines in royal history: "I want my husband." By the late 1980s, the emotional strain had grown unbearable. Diana later admitted that during this time she battled deep depression and intense feelings of isolation. Her struggle with bulimia became more severe, and she often described feeling trapped inside a public role that demanded perfection. Meanwhile, rumors of Prince Charles's renewed relationship with Camilla began to surface in the press. In 1992, the situation could no longer be hidden from the public. That December, the British Prime Minister officially announced to the House of Commons that Prince Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, had separated. The royal marriage that once captivated the world had collapsed. 4 years later, in August 1996, the divorce became final. For Diana, the end of the marriage marked the beginning of a new chapter. Free from the formal constraints of royal life, she began reshaping her role on the global stage. She remained a devoted mother to Prince William and Prince Harry, and she continued her humanitarian work with renewed independence. But fate had already begun moving toward a moment that no one could have imagined. Within a year of her divorce, Diana, Princess of Wales, would meet a man named Dodi Al-Fayed, and soon, the world would witness one of the most shocking tragedies of the 20th century. In the summer of 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, seemed to be entering a new chapter of her life. She had been divorced from Prince Charles for a year. The intense restrictions of royal life were behind her. She continued her humanitarian work and spent much of her time with her 2 sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. That summer, she also began spending time with Dodi Al-Fayed, the son of Egyptian businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed. Their relationship attracted enormous attention from the media. Photographers followed them across the Mediterranean during their holiday and later to Paris. Every movement of Diana, Princess of Wales, was watched. Then came the night of August 31st, 1997. Shortly after midnight, Diana and Dodi left the Ritz Hotel in Paris. With them in the car was bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. The driver was Henri Paul, the head of security at the hotel. As their Mercedes entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, paparazzi motorcycles were reportedly chasing the vehicle. Henri Paul accelerated. Investigators later estimated the car was traveling around 70 miles per hour in a zone limited to 30. Within seconds, the driver lost control. The Mercedes struck a concrete pillar inside the tunnel with devastating force. Henri Paul and Dodi Al-Fayed were killed almost instantly. Trevor Rees-Jones survived despite severe injuries. Diana, Princess of Wales, was still alive when emergency crews arrived, but her injuries were catastrophic. Doctors fought for hours to save her life. But in the early morning of August 31st, 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, died from massive internal bleeding. She was only 36 years old. The shock was immediate and global. An estimated 2.5 billion people watched her funeral procession days later, making it one of the largest television audiences in history. Yet the tragedy also gave rise to countless questions. Some believed the crash was not an accident at all. One theory claimed Henri Paul had been secretly paid to cause the crash. Others suggested that the British establishment feared Diana might marry Dodi Al-Fayed and therefore arranged her death. Another theory argued that emergency medical care had been intentionally delayed. A final mystery involved a letter Diana had written months before her death, expressing fear that someone might attempt to cause a car accident. These theories spread quickly through newspapers and public debate, but investigators would soon begin a massive effort to examine every claim. After the tragedy in Paris, investigators in both France and the United Kingdom began a detailed examination of what had happened that night. In Britain, the Metropolitan Police launched a major inquiry known as Operation Paget. The investigation reviewed an extraordinary number of claims, rumors, and conspiracy theories that had spread in the months and years after the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. In total, investigators examined 175 different theories. Some suggested that powerful institutions had arranged the crash. Others believed the medical response had been intentionally mishandled. Many focused on the relationship between Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed, wondering whether political or cultural tensions had played a role. But after years of investigation, the conclusion remained clear. There was no evidence that Diana, Princess of Wales, had been assassinated. The crash was determined to be a tragic accident caused by several factors. The driver, Henri Paul, had alcohol in his system well above the legal limit. The vehicle was traveling at high speed while attempting to escape pursuing photographers. And neither Diana nor Dodi Al-Fayed had been wearing seatbelts. Medical experts later explained that the injury which ultimately killed Diana was extremely rare and nearly impossible to treat in time. For many people, however, the investigation did not erase the emotional weight of that night. Diana, Princess of Wales, had become far more than a royal figure. She had become a symbol throughout her life. Diana used her visibility to bring attention to people the world often ignored. She visited hospitals, walked through minefields to raise awareness of landmines, and spoke openly about struggles with mental health at a time when few public figures dared to do so. In doing so, she reshaped the role of compassion in public life. When the funeral procession moved through the streets of London in September 1997, millions stood in silence. Flowers covered the gates of Kensington Palace. Across Britain and far beyond it, people mourned not only a princess, but a woman who had shown kindness where the world often expected distance. The story of Diana, Princess of Wales, did not end in the tunnel in Paris. Her legacy continues through the causes she championed, the people she inspired, and the 2 sons she left behind. And even today, decades later, the memory of the people's princess still speaks to millions around the world.